All right, for this, for these drawings, you're going to need your sketchbook or a blank piece of paper, your pencil, your ruler, and an eraser. What we're going to do is we're going to create 3 different 3-dimensional forms. Now I say forms because they're not shapes. They have that added element of depth to them, and we're going to shade them in. We're going to add value to show where the light is coming from. So the first thing I need you to do is go onto your page and up towards the top, go ahead and draw yourself a little horizon line and 2 vanishing points. Okay, well, the first thing we're going to do is draw a cube below eye level, and we're going to shade it in to show where the light's coming from. So I'm going to go ahead and go in here and draw the corner of my cube. I'm going to connect, draw lightly, draw small, okay? The bigger it is, the longer it's going to take you to shade this thing in, and we don't need to take a lot of time to do it. Just want to make sure that you're doing it accurately. So go ahead and connect to the right vanishing point, and then connect to your left vanishing point. And then step number 3, as you guys remember, is to cut it off. So cut it off to the right, and cut it off to the left. To make the top of the cube, we're going to crisscross. So take the top of your left cutoff line and connect it over to your right vanishing point, and the top of your right cutoff line and connect it over to your left vanishing point. You can erase away your extra. Don't worry about erasing your horizon line unless you want to. So erase away so that you can see where that cube is. Okay, now let's pretend that the light is coming from the left. If the light was coming from the left, so let's say here's our light source, the sun. If the light is coming from the left, this face of the cube is going to stay white, or it's going to stay fairly light. The opposite side of it is going to go dark. So I'm going to go in on this side, and I'm going to start to shade in just like our first value scale. Remember we did the first one, how each box is its own value. If we want something dark, we don't start by pressing really, really hard. If you use that sort of point pressure, especially in the beginning, you're going to do a couple things. You're going to dent and stretch out your paper. We don't want the paper to be rippled or dented. We want it to stay intact like the rest of the surface. Rippling it, stretching it out makes it extremely thin. So if you need to erase, you can rip through it. Plus, it just won't allow your paper to lie flat any longer. Okay, so I've gotten like my first layer on there. I'm going to make sure that it's nice and even. I'm going to put the second layer on. A little bit heavier point pressure, working in different directions, making sure the entire box is even and smooth. The other reason why we don't want it to be too much point pressure is that you get your graphite on the paper looking shiny. And remember how we talked about that when something is shiny, it reflects light. If we're trying to make this as dark as we can, we don't want it to appear light. We don't want it to appear shiny. So it's important that it's even and smooth, that you hide your pencil marks, and that the whole box, the whole face of that is about the same value. All right, so if this is light, the opposite side is the dark. Up on top, we're probably going to get some sort of medium tone. So think back to your value scale. I don't know, maybe number 5, 6, 4, somewhere in there. Something I want you to notice that's happening, because I drew lightly, is that as I'm shading, my outlines of this cube start to disappear. They get camouflaged by the value that's next to it. So every single outline should match the value that's next to it. We don't want a dark outline around any of our drawing when we're shading it in. If you look at things in real life, like this eraser, for example, we don't see a black outline that surrounds it. We definitely see darker where there's a cast shadow, but around here, there's not like there's a big dark outline like that defines the edge of it. And that's what we don't want in our drawing. The only place you're still going to see an outline is anything next to a white area. So along the white area, the highlighted area, I'm going to go ahead and just erase that line back so it's really, really light, barely visible, so we don't have a big dark outline around it. All right, the next thing we're going to do, our cube is done, is we're going to try a cylinder. So we're not going to use vanishing points for this. We're going to go ahead and just draw an oval. Again, it does not need to be big. and we're going to use our straight edge to bring the sides down so they can run parallel to each other. And then the bottom needs to run parallel to the bottom front edge of the cylinder. Okay, if this curves, this needs to curve. Now again, if the light is coming from the left, then the left side of the cylinder is going to be light or white. It's going to fade to dark on the other side. Notice there's no corners or edges on this. We're not drawing a cylinder that has stripes on it. So we're not thinking of something that has flat sides. We're thinking of something that is rounded. So we're not thinking that way. We're thinking the curve. So in order to replicate that sort of highlight shadow, we are going to be dark on the opposite side of the light, just like the cube, except we don't stop and go to a different face. We continue in a gradient. So this is going to be more like your value scale number 2 that we did, where you're dark and you're fading into the light. So notice how we do less layers, less pressure as we fade to the light side. It's important that you're hiding your outline, so draw nice and lightly, hide your outline. And it's important that you work in little ovals, circles. The idea is to try to create the illusion that the dark is dissolving away into the light, or vice versa. Your eraser can come in handy too, in little ovals or circles, and trying to make sure that you don't have that dark outline on the edge. Now the top, again, is going to be somewhat of a medium. This part does not fade because it's all the same flat surface on the top of a cylinder. So I'm going to make sure that the whole top is all the same value. Now, if you want to think cast shadows, like my eraser is casting a shadow, you can add one. Be sure to distinguish between the object, the cylinder, the object, and your shadow. So for me, I'm going to make my shadow just slightly darker than my cylinder, so that in my drawing I can tell what is the object and what is the cast shadow. You as the artist get to make that decision, which one you want to do. And our cylinder is done. The last one we're going to do is the sphere. So with the sphere, what I want you to do is just draw your best freehand circle. It really doesn't need to be perfect. Okay, we're going to pretend that that light is, again, coming from the left, maybe more like the top left. And do me a favor and put a tiny little dot right at that main hit of light. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a circle that its main highlight. Notice it's a circle. It starts and ends on that dot. So what it's not doing is this. We don't want that. This is not a circle. That's a semicircle. We need it to come all the way back around to that dot. And we're going to do another one all the way around that dot, and one more all the way around that dot. So you can see the difference. See, that's not wrapping itself around to that highlight. We need it to wrap all the way around to that highlight. So we don't want this. We want that one. Okay, now you probably can guess that we're going to have light or white. Probably white, and then like a light gray, medium, and then dark as it fades out. You can shade each one of these separately, these rings. What I like to do is I like to do little gradient scales towards the light, because sometimes when I shade each one of these rings individually, what ends up happening is that they can appear kind of stripy. So let me show you what I mean here. I start in the darkest ring with my dark point pressure and layers, and when I get to the next ring I lighten up a little bit, and when I get to the next ring I lighten up a little bit more, and then I fade to white. So here I go, dark, I'm moving towards the light, turn my paper a little bit just so it's easier to go at an angle, and I'm going to keep working my way around. So dark in the outer ring, and then lighter, 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 until I get to white. Dark here, medium, light, and white. When you get to that white, you just sort of dissolve it away. Lighten up your pressure, less layers. Okay, so as I go here now, dark, come a little bit more around with that dark there. Medium ring, light ring, white. Get yourself to the white. So dark, right in here, medium, light, and white. Notice how that dark continues even as I get close to the light side, even as I get close to that light source. I'm still having the teeniest, tiniest little ring of dark that's still happening as that sphere, that ball, curves away. So you're still doing a gradient, it's just a much quicker gradient. It doesn't take you as long to get from dark to light because there's the dark and there's the light. So it's a short little distance to fade. I'll finish it up here, fading to light. And then I can kind of like take a look and see, well, where do I need to extend that shadow a bit more? Probably a bit more right here. Where does it look like I can still see an edge? About there. That's where I can work over the top and try to get that to fade in, dissolve away. Now I might feel like I don't have much of a highlight. Remember, your eraser is not just for mistakes. It is a drawing tool when we get to value and shading. So I can use that eraser to help brighten up my highlight, soften any edges. We don't want to be using our finger to blend. Notice I haven't used my finger to blend any of this, just like we talked about with the value scales. Use your eraser. We don't want the oils of your hand getting embedded into your paper. We'll kind of fade that a bit and start to get that feeling of the light highlight hitting right on that spot. Now, if you want to add a cast shadow in here, a grounding shadow, a shadow that represents where it hits the ground, where it's resting on the ground, you can go ahead and do that. Again, it's important that you distinguish the shadow from the object. So one should be darker, one should be lighter. You're the artist, you get to decide. Also notice that I don't see any of these rings. I don't see any of those. I'm drawing so lightly that in the end, they don't show up. They're just guidelines. They're not intended for us to be able to see them in the end. And once you have your three forms shaded, go ahead and photograph them or do a media recording and turn them in.